Hello, my lovely anatomists and physiologists. Welcome back. We are ready to get into the, to me, really interesting part of the lymphatic system, but also the sort of complicated part of the lymphatic system. So definitely this is one of those like buckle your seatbelts and get ready for sort of a rough ride. But hopefully I can guide you through in a very clear and directed way. Alrighty, so we left off talking about what we called innate. What did we say? Defenses or innate immune response. Let me use that phrasing here. And we said that this is like non-specific, meaning very general. It's not picky, it's not particular about any particular bacterium, virus, fungus. It's just very, very general. Like most of these pathogens, we're going to have some way of recognizing them as being foreign and going into these attacks. And we also said innate is like, I'm going to put here like born with this sort of defense in place, so ready to go from first minute, right? First minute. Whereas when we talk about adaptive immune responses, we'll see that they're going to require exposure to activate. So let's say that our adaptive immune responses require exposure to activate. Require exposure to activate. And this is because your adaptive immune response is highly specific. Is highly specific. So now we're not doing like a generalized, you don't belong here, get out sort of defense mechanism. Instead, we are, I sometimes like to say, recognizing like your name and your social security number, your name, rank, and serial number type of thing, right? So we know exactly who the pathogen is, and we are mounting a defense particular or specific to that particular pathogen. So we're no longer being generalized here, we're being highly, highly, highly specific. But not only are we specific, but we're also versatile. And what we're going to see is we're involving here both our T cell and our B cell. Remember, these are our lymphocytes. And they have like 100 trillion. Oh my gosh, that'd be so many zeros. 100 trillion different receptors at the ready. This is part of your genetic inheritance. So based on pathogens that your ancestors have encountered, you are born with this ability to pretty much recognize nearly every type of pathogen that you're likely to encounter in your life because you have T cells and B cells that have 100 trillion different receptors, 100 trillion different receptors. Now, these are not active until exposure, but they're there ready to go when the time comes. They are there ready to go when the time comes. Okay. So we have this ability to be very specific, but also very versatile. We have this ability to recognize the particular pathogen and mount a defense. And we have the ability to recognize 100 trillion different pathogens, right? So this is so cool. This is so cool, right? Okay, so here's the other like super awesome piece. not only can we recognize particular pathogens, and not only can we recognize 100 trillion different pathogens, but we can remember them. Oh my God, this is such an amazing part. Let's do like a circly do. This is such an amazing part of our adaptive immune response. So we have to first be exposed to activate it, but then we remember it. Then we remember it. So we're developing memory cells. So with each exposure, you're developing memory, right? You're developing memory. Let's come back to this idea. Let's do one other feature of our adaptive immune response, and then let's talk a little bit more about this memory, okay? So the other like super duper important thing is that we have self-recognition. When we look at the T cell and B cell maturation process, there's actually like a T cell and a B cell boot camp. The T cells and the B cells in their immature stages go through sort of this boot camp training process where if they are recognizing and binding to your cells, meaning ultimately they might attack your cells, if they're doing that, they're destroyed. So the T cells and the B cells that are recognizing self as foreign are destroyed during the training boot camp process. So this is really cool. So what this is saying with the self-recognition is we can recognize self versus foreign. I'm going to say recognize self as a self. Let's do that. Like as safe, as don't attack. Yeah. Because we don't want to attack our own cells. And sometimes our bodies do that. And we talk about that as an autoimmune disease, right? And so that can be very damaging, obviously, to the individual. Okay. Let's talk a little bit more about this memory idea. So we're going to actually see that you have what's called a primary adaptive response. And I'm using my like first degree as my shorthand for primary. And then you have a secondary, and I'm doing like a second degree as my shorthand, adaptive response. Okay. And so the primary response is your first exposure. You're going to activate T cells and B cells. And we're going to look at the processes of activating a T cell, and we're going to look at the process of activating a B cell, and we'll look at them separately because we're learning about it for the first time. But keep in mind, if a T cell is becoming activated, then a B cell would become activated as well. So even though we'll look at them separately in terms of our understanding, the actuality of these in real life is that they're, if one's being activated, so is the other. And then, you know, in the first exposure, you're activating your T cells and your B cells. Let's also say with the first exposure, you get sick. You get sick. So we know that getting sick feels bad. We know that it's uncomfortable to be sick. Yeah. We might miss work or school. So there's some negatives to being sick in terms of that. With some of our sicknesses, we feel really bad and then we feel better and it's fine. With some of our illnesses, we feel really bad. We get organ and tissue damage. That is a lifelong issue. With some of our illnesses, we get organ and tissue damage. That is a lifelong issue. So when we're talking about our primary adaptive response is our first exposure, we're getting sick, which means we're going to feel bad and we have potential for organ and tissue damage that can be lifelong. We're activating our T cells and our B cells, and we're getting memory cells. We're getting memory cells. When we talk about our secondary adaptive response, it's the immunological memory cells that take over. And what this means is our response is super fast and super effective from like the beginning. And so in this case, you may have few to no symptoms. So you're not sick. You don't even recognize that you have this particular pathogen in your body. If you do get sick, it should be a reduced version of that feeling bad. And then what that also means is you're less likely to get that tissue or organ damage for life. So surviving that first illness means you're getting memory, which means you're not as likely to get sick again. That's why this memory is so cool. So cool, so cool, so cool. All right. Up next, we're going to talk about the very first step to that immune response, I think, is what we're ready for. And stay tuned. As always, take care of yourselves and each other.